This is Ira Gorlick, and this is another attempt at describing what a learning community is and why we need it. I'm going to talk about 5 reasons education can and should change. And I'm going to talk about why you personally might need a learning community. And I'm also going to talk about the difference between a traditional classroom and a learning community. So let me start with the 5 reasons that education can and should change. The first one, and perhaps the most important one, is that schools now, because of 21st century tools, have access to virtually infinite amounts of information because we have domesticated the electron. And the reason I talk about it in terms of domesticating the electron is you have to remember that for thousands of years, education revolved around the printed word, around books, around going to a library, physically being in the presence of information in order to get the information. The only way you could get information is being physically there. But in the 1800s, we domesticated the electron. We learned how to store information electronically. Based on that, we discovered the internet. We discovered digital libraries. And now we have access to virtually infinite amounts of information using context-sensitive search engines. It's just tremendous, and it's really changed the way education can and should be done. The second reason is that in the old days, the religious and political infrastructures were monolithic. At first, it was the religious infrastructures. Then, as religion during the Reformation lost a little power, the political structures gained control over education. And now, neither one are monolithic. Yes, there still are political and religious infrastructures for education, but now people can get education outside of these structures. Another important change that's happened is that in the old days, we had basic needs, military needs, math needs, food needs. There were literacy needs. In order to be educated, you had to be able to read and write. There were some basic needs. Nowadays, in the 21st century, those basic needs are met fairly early. And what we have is now more skill-based needs, Java programming and Photoshop and things like that, so that the basic needs are not the focus anymore, at least not throughout the educational process. Another important aspect is the traditional pyramid of knowledge has become a network of knowledge. And now we no longer have to lay information knowledge one layer upon the other. Now we have a network and we can find information as we need it. Again, it's called just-in-time knowledge, just-in-time education, where we can go out and get what we need. If you need something specific, you can go out and get it. You don't have to layer it one on top of each other. And finally, in the old days, most education was conducted in a very homogeneous environment, but now diversity is the rule and not the exception. And it's because of these 5 reasons that education can and should change. Now, I'm going to borrow a little from Jeff Foxworthy, and when he talks about, you know if you're a redneck if, well, here's how you know you need a learning community if. If you're frustrated by today's blogs where people talk, but there's no learning, then you need a learning community. This, by the way, is the biggest reason why I've started a learning community, because for years I've been participating in blogs, and you make posts, and a lot of people make posts, but there's no way to accumulate the knowledge. There's no way to add knowledge. Somebody says something really great, but there's no way to add that to the overall learning of the community. So a learning community solves that problem. If you learn something in a class that you think might help others, then you might need a learning community. In other words, let's say you're taking a class and you discover a new piece of information and say, oh, this is really helpful. Well, there needs to be a way for you to contribute that to the class in a structured way that goes longitudinal. And if that's what you find, then learning community would be for you. If you know you have something to offer other learners, but your current classes don't allow it. Many classes, as I'm going to talk about, are more one way, that you're a student, but there's no real good way for you to provide your skills into the class that can add to the overall classes. So if you're frustrated by the fact that there are skills that you could offer, but they're not being utilized in your classes, then a learning community could be for you. If you want to be an active participant in learning and not a passive test taker, and this is a big thing. I teach classes for a couple of universities, and pretty much my students are passive learners. I give them a book, I tell them what to read, they take a test. yeah, there's some blogs and there's some discussion, but there's no way to capture that active learning. Well, in a learning community, that is what it's structured for, to make learning an active process. If you believe, and this is very important, if you believe that new information should be added to the class because it will help everyone, then a learning community for you. And I teach a telecommunications law class, and net neutrality is a big topic. But there's no way that in this class I can add the net neutrality stuff that's happening as we speak to the class. A learning community fixes that problem. If you learn through participation and discussion more than reading and watching, I tend to be a verbal learner. I learn something, I have to talk about it. I have to discuss it. I just can't read something or watch something and then have it really stick with me. I need to talk about the nuance. I want to bring out my ideas and have a discussion. If my ideas are wrong, fine, but I want to be able to talk about it. And then finally, this is the most important reason why you may really fit into a learning community. If you're looking for a learning platform built on respect for others' views, and you seek out others for reasoned discussion and growth, then a learning community may be for you. And this is for me, because there's a lot of people out there who have a lot to offer, and there's no platform that I've found that allows for that discussion to go on in a reasoned way where that discussion then adds to the overall learning. And that's why I've designed a learning community. Now, this third piece, as I said, give you a high-level view of the difference between a traditional classroom, as I see it, and a learning community. The first thing is, in my classes that I teach in a traditional classroom, it's teacher-focused. It's all about me. I set the agenda, and the students are saying, what do I have to know from the instructors to get a good grade? That's what they're interested in. They're interested in the grade. They're interested in what I have to do, the instructor, to give them a good grade. And then when you ask what a successful student does, most often they'll tell you is that they really understand the teacher and what they're grading. A learning community, however, is more focused on the learner. It's more focused on the graded than the grader. What does the learner need to be graded on? It's not what the teacher wants to grade on. It's what the learner wants to be graded on. And recognize, going back to the teacher focus, the reason that it's teacher focused and it's on the grader is because I can only grade what I teach. If you bring in something else, I can't grade it. I have to grade you on what you've learned that I was teaching. Whereas in a learning community, it's about the learner focused. Now, here are some other things that make a difference. In a traditional classroom, it's one way. In a learning community, it's multi-way. In a traditional classroom, I'm the instructor. I put on a lecture. I give you the book. I give you the test. You are supposed to just receive that information. Yeah, you can ask some questions, but in essence, though, it is all one way. And I heard this saying a while ago, that the difference between a traditional classroom and a learning community is a traditional classroom is about the sage on the stage. A learning community is about the guides on the sides. So what it's saying is that in a traditional classroom, you have a great teacher. He's famous. He's got a Nobel Prize. He gets up. It's the sage on the stage. He's talking or she's talking, and you're supposed to listen and learn. But in a learning community, there may be multiple people that you can learn from. And a learning community puts a process in place for you to do that. A traditional classroom is static. A learning community is dynamic. I've taught the same class year after year after year, and the reason for that is accreditation. It costs a lot of money to get accredited, so a class gets accredited, and it has to, in order for the school to make value of that, what they have to do is use that class as long as possible. So the class is static, and it doesn't allow itself to add new information. A learning community, however, is built around a dynamic platform. Since it's learner-focused and not teacher-focused, that's easier to do. Here's another important point. Traditional classrooms and traditional schools treat all the students the same, whereas in a learning community, each student is unique. So if you think about a traditional school, traditional process, it's like the Model T going on the Henry Ford assembly line. Starts off on one place, and then somebody puts on the tires, and then it goes to the next one. Somebody puts on the fenders, and somebody puts on the front end, and somebody puts on the lights. Same as in school, you go to first grade, you learn English and math, and then you go to second grade, you learn science, you go to third grade, you learn geography, so on and so forth. Every student is the same. They go through first, second, and third grade, and they're expected to have the same instruction fit every student. Now, yeah, there's some variations because we know it doesn't work at all, and we have gifted and we have special ed for those students. But even within those programs, students are treated the same. A learning community is more like a navigation program. Everybody has their own unique personal learning plan. They have a unique destination and a unique origination, and the learning community builds that plan. And going back to the network approach to knowledge, having a network approach allows each student to learn what they need to learn. And finally, and I find this to be very important, when I teach a traditional classroom, I control the pacing. I decide what the order of the slides are going to be and the lecture. I decide the curriculum. I decide what's going to happen in week 1 and week 2 and week 3 and week 4. The teacher controls the pacing. In a learning community, the student controls the pacing. The student may jump around, and that's okay because, again, if it's student focused, if it's learner focused, that's okay. And the big reason why traditional classrooms are the way they are, and we don't see a lot of learning communities, is that traditional classrooms are easy to do, whereas a learning community is hard. I've been struggling a long time and still haven't got there as to find the right platform for a learning community. It's to make it dynamic, to make it multi-way, to make each student have a unique learning plan, to give the pacing to the student is very difficult and requires a lot of technology to do that. It's easier for me just to write a book or put together a lecture in a traditional classroom, stand up in that classroom or do a video and say, here it is, learn it. If you don't learn it, you get a poor grade. So in conclusion, what I'm saying is a learning community brings education in the 21st century by using 21st century tools. Now, in the next series of discussions, I'm going to go into more detail as to how a learning community works, and so that you can see exactly how it's built. This was just a high-level overview. I hope you like it. If you're interested in that, please get a hold of me. Let me know if I'm on the right track, if I'm not on the right track, if there's anything you can do. Do you want to join the learning community? Do you want to help me build this platform? Hopefully you like this, and let me know what you think. Thank you.